Great. Thank you very much for that, Steve. And thanks everyone for being early for this meeting. We're starting immediately. I think one other thing we should have said, Steve, is that if people want to put questions, they can put them in the chat, and you will alert me to questions, so we could get that participation from people who are actually at the meeting. So thanks for that. Okay, I should say a few words about CLS for the new people who have come onto this meeting. We meet regularly first Sunday of every month. Usually it's for 2 hours from 2 o'clock. And you're very welcome to join us at each and every meeting that we hold. Our next meeting will be in March. We'll be dealing with Windrush. As many people know, the scandal of Windrush has been raging for a little while. We will have Jackie McKenzie speak to us on that. She's been an active campaigner, doing some tremendous work around this issue. So that's for our next Sunday meeting. Now, CLS is not a funded organization. We've been going for about 40 years, and we deal mainly with issues dealing with the Caribbean and the diaspora in the UK. But of course, we're concerned all over the world, so often we'll be looking at issues in Africa and Asia, or wherever there's an issue that we think is important for our membership to put in our area. We're mainly a campaigning organization, so we take positive action and fixing and doing things. Hence this meeting. We think there's a real problem at the moment with the take-up of Caribbean people for vaccines. That issue thought might deserve some hearing and some discussion. So we're very pleased to have some people who can address this issue, and Dr. Wayne Mitchell, who will be our first speaker up, and also in Dr. Donald Palmer. So thank you for registering for this meeting. As I said earlier, we're not a funded organization, membership to raise funds for the activities that we do and for our newsletters and other things that we involve in. On our website for new people, if they're interested in joining CLS, you can visit our website. I think it's £15 a year for ordinary member organizations, £25 a year. We use that any money that we've got, the other organizations affiliated to and working with, especially in the Caribbean. Whenever there's a disaster, as hurricanes or volcanoes, we can support nations that are doing stuff to help the region. So please visit our website, and if you're interested, take out a membership and be a part of this work. Okay, I will stand and begin now with the main topic, which I will introduce Dr. Wayne Mitchell, who is the senior of the Department of Immunology and at the Imperial College London. Dr. Wayne, can you speak to us? Thank you.
What is muted?
There you go.
He's still muted.
I'd like to.
You're unmuted from the.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
all right. I'd like to just thank the organisers for inviting us to come on to give a little bit of a perspective on the COVID-19 vaccination and how it impacts the Caribbean community. It is an honor to be able to see so many people on the platform this afternoon. The perspective that we're going to try to, myself and Professor Donald Palmer and Dr. William Acker, we're going to try to have a kind of holistic viewpoint of what it means to be vaccinating from a number of standpoints. Donald Palmer is going to lead off by looking at the overall immune system and how the immune system operates. And from there, we will then look at issues related to trust and why people may not want to take up the vaccination. And then William will give us kind of like a rounded overview of, from like a spiritual theological perspective, of some of the reasons why people may be hesitant and why we need to overcome these things. So at this moment in time, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Palmer, who's going to give us a presentation on the immune system and vaccination. Then I'll speak, and then William Acker will come in. Okay.
Okay. Firstly, I hope everyone can hear me. Brilliant. So I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to talk to you today. And what Dr. Mitchell, what Wayne has mentioned, what we're really going to do is just, in my case, just to give you an overview of the immune system. I should stress, or I put a disclaimer, I'm not here to convince you to take or not take the vaccine. My role really is just to provide you with the necessary information so you can make an informed decision, okay? So that's the premise. And I really just want to talk to you about the immune system, and in the case, why do we sometimes need vaccines? And then about herd immunity, okay? So my talk is going to be quite small. And if you've got any questions afterwards for either myself, Wayne, or my other dear colleague, William, then by all means. So if I can have the next slide, because Wayne has kindly agreed to be controlling this. So I'm really grateful for Wayne for doing this. So I put this slide up. It's really just, it serves two purposes. It's one, to highlight the role of the immune system, but also highlight where infections occur. So there are generally three routes that should be considered in terms of how we can become infected. So one of the routes is by ingestion, like, for example, contaminated food poisoning. Another route is whereby we could actually, cut our skin. So, a potential microorganism can enter it into our body. And a third route, which I guess is common to many of us really, isn't it? Is inhalation. It's actually infection through, what we call the nasopharynx system, through our nose, okay? And we're well aware of things like flu, and now currently, with, COVID-19. And so you can see, the rationale, for example, of why people are asked to wear masks, okay? It serves as both, a protection in many ways. But that's the three main areas of which one can become infected. So then if we look at what our immune system involves, next slide, please. What you should notice, and I should say the other thing, is that for the majority of slides I've got, they've actually come with references, all right, with hyperlinks. So if anybody's interested into looking further at this, they're more than able to do so. But in terms of our body's defenses, and this is one of the reasons why I really got into immunology, is that what I found really fascinating is how there are many layers of the body defenses. So what we call the frontline defense, our innate or our natural immune system, consists of the skin. I'm sure you're all aware that of the acid in our stomach. And indeed, the lining of our sort of gut is really important in preventing microbes from getting into the body. And similarly, even the sweat and the tears that we produce contain activities that will prevent microbes from growing. It's a fascinating immune system that we have. Nevertheless, if, for example, a microbe does enter into our body, we have a group of, what we call white blood cells. And you would have heard throughout, particularly around the COVID pandemic, the term antibodies. These are just soluble proteins. And basically our adaptive immune system is critically important, but collectively, this is our immune system. So let me go a bit further. In particularly, how does the immune system work against viruses? Next slide, please. So here's how a virus can make you ill. So what a virus needs to do, it needs to get into, it needs to firstly attach to a cell. So any cell in our body is prone to become infected. What then viruses will do is they'll get inside the cell, and basically they'll use the cell machinery to make more viral particles. And by doing so, it causes cell destruction. Okay? So that's how viruses work. So a key part in terms of our body's protection against viruses are basically what we call these soluble proteins, these antibodies. And by producing these antibodies, what they do, the most important thing they do, is they actually prevent the attachment. So if a virus can't attach to your cell, they can actually prevent this destruction of the cells taking place. So your antibodies that coat these viruses are incredibly important. So next slide, please. So let's remember this, the idea that our antibodies, these soluble proteins that we all produce, can actually prevent the viruses from destroying. But what I want to mention here is that there are times, sadly, when we do need vaccines. And why is that? And I hope you can see the list of viruses in the blue box here. And for many of these viruses, we actually have vaccines for. So why do we sometimes need vaccines? Now, the key thing about making these soluble proteins, these antibodies, is that they take some time. So when a virus first comes into contact with our body, the body will use natural mechanisms, natural defenses to try and remove any virus or any microbe. And one of the things that happens is that there's an increase in body temperature. And actually that's a body mechanism of trying to remove or destroy the microbe. Clearly, it can't persist because increasing body temperature can be detrimental subsequently, but that's a natural body's response to try to remove the potential, microbe. So it takes a while for these antibodies to be produced. But if we see the antigen more than one occasion, on several occasions, what you see on this graph is the fact the response is quicker and greater. That's what we call immunological memory. And that's one of the most fascinating things about our immune system. We actually remember each antigen, each microbe that we encounter. So the response now, when we see it again, will be greater and will be quicker and long lasting. That's what we call memory. However, one of the things vaccines will do is it will prime and it will boost the immune system so that when you do encounter that potential pathogen, that microbe that can cause disease, your immune system has already made those antibodies. And that's a really important thing because for some individuals, the difference between making these antibodies could be several days. It could be related to age. It could be related to diet. It could be related to several things. And therefore, it's really important that for some disease, we do have what we call these pre-existing antibodies. So how does vaccines work? And how vaccines work is they mimic an actual infection. Invariably, they don't contain the actual microbe. They actually contain either a dead version or a part of a version, but what they're doing is harmless. And what they're doing is boosting your immune system. So you've got these pre-existing antibodies. So that when you see that pathogen, that antigen again, that microbe, you're now already primed and you can now remove it from circulation. It's what's referred to as you being immune. Next slide, please. And here are examples, because I'm sure many of us will be aware, is measles have been around for an incredibly long period of time. There's even data to suggest in the 19th century in Africa, evidence of using such material to develop immunity has been evident. But I just produced this one slide as an example of measles. And anyone who was born, who's aware of what happening in measles in the 1950 and 1960 can account for one of the important things that vaccination has done is practically eradicate, not fully, but almost fully eradicate vaccines. Final slide, and this is really where I want to end with the concept of herd immunity. Because we've often heard, particularly around COVID, is that, well, I would like to, perhaps we can do it related to natural immunity. Now, the problem with natural immunity is the fact that because COVID sadly can kill, then the concept of herd immunity doesn't necessarily apply. Most commonly, herd immunity refers to the population of individuals where the vast majority of them get vaccinated. So let me explain this slide. If only a few people get vaccinated, right? In this, and thank you, Wayne, for highlighting that. If only a few people get vaccinated, then the virus can still spread. And now there's evidence to suggest, particularly with the AstraZeneca Oxford, that there's a reduction with transmission. And that's recently come out this week. And if anybody's interested in the paper, let me know, because it's just appeared in the Lancet. Okay, so if only a few people are vaccinated, the virus can still spread. However, if the majority of people get vaccinated, what will then happen? It would limit the spread, and basically, a large number of people therefore develop immunity, and that's the concept of herd immunity. Okay, so I'll stop there and to allow my dearest friend and brother and colleague now to take the stand. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Donald.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. I hope it was clear and made sense.
That was very clear and very precise. I've learned so much from that. What we will do is we'll allow the other speakers, and then at the end we will take questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Right. So hopefully you can see my slides here now. Right, let me just. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about COVID-19 vaccination in the Black community or in the Caribbean community. Should we be vaccinated, yes or no? The whole idea behind this is probably driven by what we would class as vaccine hesitancy. I don't know if you heard, but a couple of weeks ago, there was a report which said 85% of the population are, 85% of the population are happy to be vaccinated, but of the other 15%, 72% from the African and Caribbean and Asian communities don't want to be vaccinated, or they're hesitant at being vaccinated. So I think we need to look at some of the issues related to that. And so we're going to just quickly go through some of those. So if we think about it, many of the lived experiences of Black people in the NHS, they will have felt that they've had a poorer service because for some reason, pain scores for Black people they can tolerate more than other people. And for women in childbirth, there's 4 times more likely that Black woman is going to die in childbirth compared to a white woman. And why is that? So the service, the lived experience makes you think, well, are they actually looking out for us? You've got as Donald had also said, something about the social media conspiracy theories, such as there is no COVID doesn't exist. It's all down to 5G, or inside the vaccines, you're using aborted fetuses to make these things. Again, these are conspiracy theories, but they take traction within the community, and then it makes people less likely to want to take the vaccination. Governmental handling of Black related issues. I can only just, it was very interesting that Luke, you said that next month you'll be looking at the Windrush scandal. I don't know if you had already looked at my notes, but that's what I've got down here. The handling of things like the Windrush scandal makes us hesitant. Simple as that. Reports on inequalities are rife. So all of those things make you more hesitant about whether or not you should take up their offer of a vaccination. And then we've got the historical abuses of the Black body. You only have to think about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, which lasted from 1932 to 1972. And the Henrietta Lacks, how they took her cells and made billions without even telling the family what was going on. And just as recently as last year, where the 2 French scientists said, let's test the vaccine in Africa, right? so if anything happens, it will happen to them. So it's that kind of like abuse of the Black body which makes people reticent. And the part which I'm going to try and focus on specifically is in relation to the speed at which the vaccination has been developed. Because people are saying, why that's too quick? That's too quick, right? It's how has it come to, how have we come to this when we know that it takes ages for vaccines to develop? So that is the element which I'm going to try to focus on and help us to understand how we've got to where we are right now. So in this circle of trust, I went to the Follocks, never mind, the circle of trust. Inside our issues of trust, I think there's a number of issues which I've tried to highlight, which is the development of the vaccine protection, how it will protect us, and then the long-term impacts on our bodies. The things which I'm not going to go into, but there are considerations which I think are really important, are things with relation to the governmental handling, and then also the things related to who may be benefiting from these vaccinations, so the biotech companies, authorities, etc. I'm not going to focus on those. I'm only going to focus on the first three, okay, in relation to our issues of trust. So the vaccine development, so fast, how so fast, and is it safe? Now, I don't know how many of you know about technology, but I'm going to give you this illustration of the carrier pigeon to the mobile phone. If you think about it, back in before the Common Era, the carrier pigeon was an effective way to get information from one place to another. As long as the pigeon knew where it was going, it could get there in a couple of days or a couple of hours, and you could deliver a message. Now, using Twitter, that's instantaneous. You can get your information from one place on the planet to another place in seconds. So the advancement in technology has meant that something which would have taken a long time in the past to have been delivered now has been accelerated beyond our imagining. So if we continue with that idea, the thing about that advancement in technology, it's meant that it's enabled us to identify pathogenic agents. So in this case, the SARS-CoV-2, which is the version of coronavirus, which is causing the COVID-19, right? And to identify what I would class as suitable targets. And a suitable target in this case is the spike protein. And if you can see my background, it's these elements here, which are classed as the spike proteins, which are the things that our vaccines are trying to mimic. Okay, so it's a non-pathogenic, or it's a non-pathogenic replication of these spike proteins, which is being made for some of the viruses, for some of the vaccines. Okay, so with that, we get this kind of cycle. We've got better technology, and that better technology leads to a better knowledge and understanding of how our immune system works. So it comes into this cycle. With new technology, we get increased knowledge. With increased knowledge, it drives the technology, and that technology then, so we've got this, I'm not going to call it a vicious circle, it's this increasing circle of knowledge, technology, leading to more advancements and more advancements more quickly. The other thing which I wanted to just highlight is the fact that the SARS-CoV-2 is a new variant of a common foe. So the coronaviruses, we've known about the coronaviruses, and in particular the SARS coronavirus has been identified on the 16th of November 2002, which means by the time it became active in this new variant, we had had 17 years of trying to identify various elements of the COVID-19 or of the SARS viruses, so that although people may think, oh, it's a new variant, yes, it is, but with the advances in technology, we are able to identify what's the difference between previous strains and this new strain, and how we can actually tackle it effectively. So I suppose the third element, which is probably key, one of the most key elements to the whole vaccine development, is this idea about collaboration and not competition. The scientists which were involved, it was a global collaboration, over 180 research laboratories, 100 biotechnology companies, and an investment of $24 billion. When you've got that amount of money with that amount of expertise and skills, and they're sharing the information, they're not competing against each other to who's going to be the first. When you've got that level of cooperation and collaboration, things can move very rapidly. And I just want to let you know that in total, there's a total of 77 different COVID-19 vaccinations, which are currently going through clinical trials across the world. Okay, we are using 3, which I'll go into very shortly, but there are still another 73, 74 variants and possibly more, which are coming on board, suggesting that there are going to be a multiplicity of vaccines available to us. So just to reiterate, if you've got low manpower, low investment, this technology knowledge wheel will move slowly. And then you've got to also consider about the recruitment of people who you can test on the clinical trials. All of those things will take time. And that means that the whole process can take 10 to 15 years in order to get through the process. On the other hand, if you've got high manpower, high investment, this technology knowledge wheel is going to move very rapidly. And with the numbers who volunteered, which is on my next slide, they've been able to reduce that time from 8 to 10 years to 8 to 10 months. And it really is down to the level of investment, the level of cooperation, and the levels of recruitment of people that has enabled that to happen. Mm. So in summary, and this is taken from the British Society of Immunology, which is Donald is a key member of. He sits on the advisory group and things. They've produced a very brilliant summary sheet, which highlights those key elements about how we were able to get to the vaccine, get the vaccine developed so fast. So the 3 vaccines which we have, which are offering the protection, are the Oxford AstraZeneca, we've got the Moderna, and we've got the Pfizer. Now, they've been reported to have all of them requiring about 2 doses. One is a viral vector, and 2 of them are parts of RNA, which is part like your genetic code, which contains a message for a specific protein. And once that message has been read and the protein has been produced, then it disappears, it's gone, it's broken down. So the technology is being used by using these RNA vaccines as opposed to, so it's only for a segment of the virus. There is nothing else in this code which they have put in which can relate back to a fully functional viral protein or a fully functional virus. It's just one very small element. It's just this, but none of the body, if that makes sense. Okay. And because of the sensitivities, it works in slightly different ways. I just wanted to just summarize, because some people also think about, well, what about protection? Has it been tested on Black people? Has it, and where is it? How do we know? It's been tested across the world, and you can see that in total, there's been almost 100,000 people who have been tested at phase 3 clinical trials, okay? Which is a huge number of individuals to have been tested in such a short space of time. So when you think about that volunteering, that's one of the reasons, or the number of volunteers who have come forward for the test, that's one of the reasons why it is where we are right now. So In terms of what the virus does, or what the vaccine does, sorry, the vaccine does not prevent you being infected or transmitting the COVID-19. It doesn't do that, okay? As Donald was just saying, there are some reports out this week which were, and this is an ever-changing thing, right? Last week, this slide was up to date. By yesterday evening, it was out of date because something else is coming. And that's how science works. As new data comes in, you look at the new data and you accommodate for it. So at the moment, it looks as though it doesn't prevent infection. There may be some questions about whether or not it's preventing transmission now, but more studies need to be done. But prior exposure to this harmless element of the virus, right, that's in the vaccine, enables the immune response to be faster when it does encounter the harmful virus. And so what does that actually mean? That means that when you become, when you're vaccinated, it means that it will reduce the severity of the infection. Do you remember what Donald said, or Donald highlighted that there could be up to like a 2 to 3 week gap between you having encountered the virus and your body being able to develop the effective immune response which you need. Now, if you've had already been primed, you can actually accelerate that. So instead of, when you do encounter the virus, instead of it taking 2 to 3 weeks, it will be, your response will be within 2 to 3 days. And that could be very crucial, okay? The other thing that will mean is that it will reduce, there will be a reduction in hospital admissions. And we're hoping that it would also mean that there'll be a reduction in the levels of restrictions which are currently in place. So the lockdown and the social distancing measures. Final thing, which I want to just highlight, and then I'll stop, is the long-term impact on our body. So we take the vaccine, people have said it might cause autoimmune diseases. It's still a bit early to know all of this, right? Most adverse effects of a vaccine appears kind of like within either at the time when you take the vaccine or very soon after, within 2 to 3 weeks of having taken that vaccine. I'm not saying that that's how it will be in this case, we don't know. But we do know that we've had thousands of volunteers who have now been monitored for several months, and there has been no major concerns. I know there was a report a couple of weeks ago about in Norway, there were 13 deaths after a vaccination. But these were very frail and elderly people who this happened to. So there will be other considerations that you have to take into account when considering what to do with the vaccination. And as I said, as of Friday, we know that there's been over 10 million people who have received the vaccine in the UK. So what I would say, find some real credible sources of information. If you want to know a little bit more about some of the stuff which I've spoken about, I would recommend that you go and have a look at this, A Guide to Vaccination for COVID-19, which is by the British Society for Immunology. And I've got the link here. And again, I can pass that on to everyone. The other thing is that we need to get the community to fully understand. And what you'll have seen recently is people like Patrick Vernon, OBE, who received the Oxford vaccine in January of this year. And you'll see people from the Asian community who have released videos saying why it's important to take the vaccine. And you've also seen the MPs uniting. Oh, I didn't think I'd see that, but the MPs united in giving their voice to the idea that we should be vaccinated. So I'm going to, these are some resources which you can use, but I'm going to hand over to William, who's now going to give us a final perspective from from a more theological and social impact of what's happened. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to Dr. Acker, before we go to Dr. Acker, I just wanted to say a few words. This has been very exciting. Some of my colleagues on CLS will know I'm very interested in working on other issues apart from politics. I do some social things. One of the things I very much wanted to do as a young man going to be a doctor. So you just inspire me and reminded me so much. Biology was one of my favorite subjects. And I feel like I'm back in class. You make it so easy and so nice, very refreshing. So thank you very much for that. And especially to you, Wayne, because you also introduced some politics into this issue here for me, because racism, plays an important, I think, in what is happening in the Black communities at the moment. And from my own personal experience, I remember many years ago when there was a drive to get people to donate blood, and I went to give some blood, and I thought I wasn't very well received, and I never trusted they didn't just chuck my blood down the drain, and I never went. So we know that these things can affect how we behave and how we respond to the initiatives that they're trying to make. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions at the end. And we'll now move on to Dr. Acker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke. Yes, and thank you for the invitation and for the presentations by my colleagues. So I'm a social scientist, so I won't really speak to the medical, but more to the political and the social, but with the religious lot, because I'm interested in so as I research and teach around religion and politics in Africa and the African diaspora. And so one of the things that has been evident through the pandemic is the rise of conspiracy theories around COVID, as Wayne outlined, and then the very negative perception was the vaccines and of science then that has arisen from that. And in some circumstances, yes, certainly for good reason, given the history of racism and discrimination that we have experienced. And I think Wayne outlined those things very well. I suppose my take would be that, yes, we've experienced horrendous racism and discrimination for centuries. But the answer shouldn't be to run to the hills and hide, but actually to come together as a community and fight for justice. So the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah says, "Since my people are crushed, I am crushed. I mourn and horror grips me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then is there no healing for the wound of my people?" And we know our people have been wounded by COVID, more likely to get sick, more vulnerable, more likely to die. So there's an issue of ethics and justice right at the heart. So my argument would be is rather than retreat, we have to demand of the authorities justice. And that justice not only includes vaccine equity, but it includes shielding equity, furlough equity, all the other issues. And if we are suffering more, why aren't the authorities there for us in our times of need and in our difficult circumstances? If they were there for us in our times of need, in through our challenge, then people would maybe more be willing to trust the authorities in relation to the vaccine. But because when the reports came out that we were more vulnerable, more likely to die, what was the call? we need more evidence. We need more of this. We need more of that. But then when the vaccine has become available, it's, oh, our communities are hesitant. We need to get messages to give them the vaccine. Now, when my time's come to take the vaccine, I would take the vaccine. And actually, one of the reasons for that, or not one of the reasons, I would say one of the reasons why, in a sense, the racist systems and structures that we are a part of want us to take the vaccine is because they need us. They still need us to work in the health service. They still need us to run the transport systems. They still need us to work in the supermarkets. So if our community doesn't take the vaccine, those systems will collapse. And it could be that as well, people in the wider community also become more vulnerable. So actually, there is a naked self-interest in why the broader society is pushing us to take the vaccine. But actually, that should alert us, if we're a bit wise, that must tell us that it actually works. And as Wayne and Donald have outlined, is not harmful in the way that the conspiracy theorists are leading us to believe, that somehow if we take the vaccine that we're going to have some mark of the beast, or we're not going to be able to buy and sell and do all of these kinds of things. Another clue that should alert us is the fact that white Western European countries, by and large, they've been hoarding the vaccines, haven't they? So if they were keen to inject us and damage us, why are they hoarding it so much? Why have they been fighting over it? Why have they been engaged, in a sense, in white-on-white trade wars to keep hold of the vaccine? It's because they know that it's actually a positive cure for COVID. So again, there's some other then reasons as to why these things are taking place. But I think, so then that brings me then to my last point, is that for us then, I think we're engaged then in a broader struggle for equity and justice. That, once again, in a way, we've seen how white supremacy is at work through these crises, how these crises are used to marginalize, denigrate, and do negative things to our community. But actually, if we love our communities, if we want to struggle for our communities, then the idea can't be to retreat and to hide. The idea is to advocate for and on behalf of our communities, to join that broader struggle for justice. And as it talks about in Revelation, that the old order of things has to pass away. And that, in a sense, that old order of things is white supremacy, that started from enslavement and runs into the contemporary era. That is our struggle. Let us not get, in a sense, blindsided or moved into the red herring that somehow vaccination is the killer for us. Let us be engaged in broader struggles for equity and justice. Let's engage in a politics of hope and a faith of justice that leads to better health outcomes for all of us and for all of our communities. So, and I'll leave it at there. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, let me get my video. Sorry, got caught without my video. Thank you very much there, Dr. William Acker. Political issues are so important because we know before this, that actually was able to come up with a vaccine. They were saying how they was going to share it out amongst countries. Nobody would be left out, and so on. But we know that since the vaccine is being developed, some countries, Britain, for instance, have got enough to inoculate each person 6 times. Canada probably 10 times. And poorer countries are yet to receive any or are having to pay for vaccines. And we felt like some promises were made by the international community about how this would be equitable distribution, and we don't see that coming forward. So those political questions are fantastic. What I would like to do is to maybe just put a few questions to I have been looking at the chat, and there's 3 questions, and if any of you doctors would like to respond, or each of you might want to respond in a different way, that would be fantastic. From looking at the chat, most people are very delighted in the presentations, how simple and easy to understand it was, and congratulatory to you. So I will join in that. Now, one of the first questions is from Usman Ali, whose question is about why is there different success rates in the vaccines, in the different vaccines that are happening? You know, some 62%, some 90%, and so on. Well, what is the explanation for this?
I suppose it depends on the time frame when it is that the measure is taken. What they've said, like for the one of them, which was at 62%, that would be 62% after the first dose, and then once you've had the second dose, it increases up to about 95%. So if you only have one dose, you only get kind of like partial immunity, whereas once you've had the second dose, and that's the reason why, or one of the reasons why they recommend that it's a 2-stage approach. So it's the initial priming followed by the booster to ensure that that your body has developed the necessary antibodies to recognize the pathogen when it comes in. So I think that's the difference. That's the difference on the reporting. All of them are at roughly about 90%.
Thank you very much for that. If I can add another bit to the question, really, because I think for some people, there was news that if you had the vaccine, you should get it within 3 weeks or something. And now it's being extended in some cases to about 3 months. And I raised this question because I've had the vaccine, and if you think, oh, you look too young to have got it so quickly. I only got it because a friend of mine who I care for and who lives around the corner, she's 104 and she wanted to have her vaccine. So I thought, let's go. And so when I took her for a vaccination, I argued my case to get mine same time because I've got to bring her back. And they agreed to let me have my vaccine at the same time. But as far as I can tell, we're having to wait perhaps up to 3 months before we get the second dose of the vaccine.
Yeah, I can answer that, Wayne, and then maybe you want to come in. So there's both the pragmatic approach, and actually there's now data that suggests the 3 months window, and that data has just recently been published by both the AstraZeneca. So one of the pragmatic approach, and this was mentioned by the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Dan Tan, and one of the problem was, and there was an issue in terms of at that time, because the number of people that was sadly passing away was quite high. You know, back at the beginning of January, late December, the numbers were really frightening. And there was also, from what I understood, there was also a concern about, you know, getting the number of vaccines to the UK, as you would have heard the issue around the EU and the border. So there was discussion, which was then taken by SAGE, which is the government independent advisory committee, and they looked at the evidence, and this is the point that Wayne made about protection at 62%, because the other vaccine gave you protection of the first dose of around 80%. So they decided to take a pragmatic approach. Was, well, if, for example, we've only got 100 doses, right? And let's say we got 200 people. Is it the case that we give only the doses of 2 to just 50? So only 50 people get the 2 doses, and the others don't get a dose? Or is it a case to spread it out so that at least more people get 1 dose, so there is at least some degree of protection? And so they've gone with that approach, and the evidence suggests that it's able to do. And I should also point out, the reason why there was this concern, and a natural concern, was the clinical trials was based on the window of 3 weeks. Interestingly, some of the clinical trials, particularly with AstraZeneca, was actually a longer period. So they were able to look at that data and also to indicate, well, this is possible. And indeed, papers are now coming out to highlight that, yeah, you can get a degree of protection with just 1 dose. And in fact, the 1 dose might also be able to lower transmission. So one of the things the studies are now coming out is that, and this was actually seen in the clinical trials, and this is what Wayne mentioned, it's still not clear if getting vaccination can prevent disease, but what it appears to be doing so far, and I really urge people to constantly look on, for example, I tell you, the BBC website is quite good in actually showing you that information. And one thing that's come out, it seems both from the clinical trials and indeed the individuals that have been taking the vaccine, is that it reduces the level of severe disease. So individuals that have been vaccinated so far, the evidence suggests they won't get severe disease, unlike when they did the trials compared to those that didn't have the vaccine, the so-called placebo. So it's a case where, and I think Wayne's right in that we don't know all the outcomes, but I think there should hopefully be enough evidence for people to make informed decisions. And so far, the number of people that have been vaccinated, both in the UK and also in the US, from what I've read, the situation in Norway is slightly different because there's still a question mark about that. But if we talk about the UK, so far, there's been no detrimental outcome from the 10 million people or so that are currently taking the vaccine.
Oh, okay, yeah, yes, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Oh, sorry, let me unmute my.
Daniel,
Right, you're on Luke. Luke, you're on mute now.
Luke, you're working in reverse. You've just muted yourself.
Sorry. Now I have to start all over again. Thank you, Frank, for coming in and putting me on that. It's very reassuring to hear that, because I was beginning to fear that I waste my time going and get a vaccine so quickly. So I'm very pleased to hear that. We've got a number of other speakers, but there are more questions up there. I'll just ask one more question to this panel, and I hope you won't disappear, because I suspect more questions will be coming up before we finish the meeting. We've got 2 other speakers who will come in for 5-10 minutes speaking, and then we can rejoin the whole meeting again. But I'll put the one question that is up there at the moment, and this one is coming from Elsie Gale, who would like to know if there's any information. What do you guys know about the Cuban vaccine? Do you know anything about the Cuban vaccine?
I heard it was still in clinical trials. I don't know about you, Wayne, but from what I understand, they were still doing clinical trials and planning to get as many people involved in that as possible. That's the only thing I've heard. But I believe there is some publications coming out in the British Medical Journal. So if I find out, I can put that on the link.
Oh, great.
I had a quick look on Friday and saw a little bit about the Cuban vaccine, and the Cuban historically, Cuban medicine has been kind of like at the forefront. They've been really good. So I would be very interested to find out a little bit more about how it's been developed and the effectiveness of it. I don't know too much about where it is at the stage. I think, as Donald said, they are in clinical trials, and I think because in the Cuban population at the moment as well, that COVID is not rampant within the Cuban population. So they've sent their clinical trial data is being almost outsourced. So they're going across to other areas where they've sent the vaccine and they're waiting for the data to come back in so that they can then fully evaluate how effective it is. That's as far as I know at this moment in time. There's some good questions in there, but I'll see if we can answer them.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, I want everyone to make sure you have your meeting, but I think I've seen a question from Michelle and others, which I think is important later on we try to address. And I'm well aware we've also got some medical doctors present. So
yes,
I'm hoping they can also contribute to the discussion, because I think it's really important. These are really good and important questions. And I think I really commend.
We will make sure you get enough time for them. It's very gripping for us, for me at least. It's very exciting to hear how the developments are going. And the Cuban question, of course, is very important for us in the Caribbean, because we know of their socialist policies that they're more likely to make sure the rest of the Caribbean get a vaccine if the Western countries fail us. So a lot hangs on the Cuban vaccine for us in the region. Thank you very much for that. Now, if I can ask Hector to come in now and speak to us. Hector, you there?
Yep, I'm here. Yeah, hi there.
Great, please.
Okay, firstly, thanks for the invitation. And I'm a bit nervous following three doctors, who are the least and educationally qualified speakers so far today. I just wanted to make a few observations regarding the vaccine discussion. It may not have been picked up in the chat. I know, certainly speaking to relatives and other friends, there've been two barriers that people have raised, which I know have been clarified recently to people taking the vaccine. One, does the vaccine contain animal products, and does it contain alcohol? And my understanding, and hopefully the doctors who are well qualified for me can come in and clarify. I think the answer is no to both of those.
Yeah.
And I think it's useful if that is put out there, because I know certainly that has been a barrier to people, not a barrier to people taking the vaccine. I think the other observation I'll make, and I know this, somebody went to Africa a couple of years ago, I had to have loads of vaccines before I went. And it was the choice, well, you don't have the vaccines, you ain't going. So I think there will be that pressure. I mean, I'm not sure what a lot of countries are doing, but I'll be surprised if many countries around the world are not going to start to stipulate that unless you've been vaccinated, you're going to have difficulties entering that country. So I think those issues are going to be apparent. So those are just two observations for what it's worth. First, in terms of my contribution, I don't want to speak for too long. I think there's a lot of good questions in the chat. I want to talk briefly about the Zero COVID campaign. I'm the national officer of BARAC, which is Black Activists Rising Against Cuts, which is an organisation that was founded by Lee Jasper and Zita Holborn in 2010. And basically, the main purpose of that organisation is, at that time, we were concerned about the coalition government's policies and how it would disproportionately adversely impact the Black community in this country. And it was basically a campaigning group to basically challenge the then coalition government on the issues that we thought that we would be facing. We've affiliated recently to the Zero COVID campaign. And the reason for that is, it seems, certainly from our observation, there's two sort of schools of thought in terms of how to handle the pandemic. There seems to be a containment strategy and an elimination strategy. the view that we've come to, I know there is contentious discussion about it, is that we believe an elimination strategy is a better strategy. The one example which I think a lot of people will know about is New Zealand. New Zealand, it seems they've eliminated COVID in New Zealand, so much so now that they don't need to have social distancing. They're having open air concerts and such like. And so they've had a much more of a return to sort of normal, and I use the term normal in quotes, normal life in terms of that. So Zero COVID is basically a campaign to say that actually we should adopt an elimination strategy in the UK. The Zero COVID campaign is an organising conference on the 16th of January. Barack took part in that conference. It's a broad-based campaign and it's a grassroots campaign. So it's not like a command structure that has a centralised control of the campaign. Lots and lots of individual groups and individuals all taking part in that campaign, and they all have a voice and a say of how the campaign is going forward. There's an upcoming conference that's the Zero COVID campaign are running this coming Saturday on the 13th of February, and the theme of that particular event is to do with ecology and economics of the pandemic. Because clearly, the COVID pandemic has had huge health issues, and it's called a huge health crisis, but it's actually then led to an economic crisis. So we believe as part of the campaign, we need to discuss what does the economy look like post-pandemic, because certainly we reckon that there does need to be changes in how the economies are run, because one of the arguments that's been put forward, that actually the way that, humanity has been running itself over the last few decades, it's actually made pandemics like COVID more likely and more frequent. That's the discussion that we feel that does need to happen. And also, again, the impact of COVID on the ecology of the planet, I think, is, again, something that we do need to have a discussion about going forward. Because we're quite clear is that a lot of people say we want to try and get back to normal. But actually, for many of us, including, people from the African and Asian diaspora, normal wasn't that great. Wasn't that great? So we need to have a discussion of what does the world look like post-pandemic, and that's part of the discussion that the Zero COVID campaign wants to foster. Very, very glad that Diane Abbott MP is going to be chairing one of the sessions at this Saturday's conference. I haven't done any fancy PowerPoint. What I can do, I can put a link to the Zero COVID website. There's plenty of information resources on there that people can look at their leisure. That's absolutely no problem at all. I mean, one of the things that just want to make a couple of further observations before I close, is basically, I think certainly from a UK perspective, there does need to be at some point a reckoning about how the pandemic has been handled in this country. The fact that we have the highest death rate in Europe, I think questions do need to be asked about that. I always remember back to the start of the pandemic, and you might remember on the news, they showed the montages of the first health workers that died because of COVID. And one particular thing struck me. They were all for people from the African and Asian diaspora. And again, that raises issues and concerns about the impact on our communities of this pandemic. And it's something I think the government does need to be held account about, because I think certainly we have suffered, I think, clearly disproportionately as a result of this pandemic. And I think certainly one of the things, again, the Zero COVID campaign is looking at is to highlight that and to challenge the government over that particular issue going forward. So I don't want to go on for too much longer, Luke. I'll say I'll put the link to the website in the chat and people can look at that. But I'll pause it because I know there's quite a lot of questions and I don't want to take up time for people to answer the questions. So if that's okay, I will pause there.
Thank you very much, Hector. Thank you very much. You've raised a lot of the political questions that needs raising. So thank you for that. And I'll give the doctors a chance to respond, because I think maybe the amount of questions that are building up, maybe they can deal with a few of those questions they've noticed in the chat, and also to respond to some of the questions that you've raised about the vaccine and how it's being distributed in this country and what has happened politically around it. Okay, so if is Dr. Wayne with us, or Michelle and Dr. Palmer, are you there?
Yep.
Yes. Would anybody like to respond to any of those questions that Hector's put up?
You've got two hands raised, Luke.
Okay, good.
You've got two hands raised.
So
if we can let Dr. Palmer or Dr. Wesley respond, and then we'll do. I haven't seen the hands. Where the hands? I'll check for the hands.
Yeah, Glenroy and Patsy.
They'll come in after. So if we get the two doctors to respond, and then Steve, if you're there in the background, if you can let the hands get a chance to put a question.
I can comment, and I know there are some medical doctors who work in the NHS, and perhaps they may feel they I'm happy for them to comment as well, because I don't work in the NHS. Like you, Hector, when I saw the images of of individuals, or should I say diverse background, sadly in terms of the front line of defense, I naturally was, and what I also equally concerned was from Republic of England came out again to highlight, and in fact something my dearest brother mentioned was I was suggesting that it should be us that should get the vaccine first. I would have been arguing that given the jobs that we're doing, which are now people are regarding almost as key essential jobs, I would argue we should be the first in line for the vaccine. But recognizing the issue around vaccine hesitancy, I realized when I was talking about that with friends and colleagues, that was a potentially a non-starter. But I really want others to comment who work on the front line in the NHS, because I know there's issues around the fact that, BAME health workers are sadly pushed into those situations, those circumstances where they may find it difficult to challenge. There's areas around PPE, etc. And I guess I'm, aware of those because of the information I've read and speaking to individuals that work in that sector. But if anyone is here that work in that sector that can add further light onto that situation, then yeah, please do, I believe.
Luke, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got to say that all over again. Sorry, I don't have the hands raised on my computer here. But if, Steve, you're in the background.
Can I say, there's two people have raised their blue hands. One is Patsy Cummings and the other is Glenroy Watts.
Yeah.
Okay, but before we have those two speakers, before we have those two questions, there was a question that has been up for a little while, and it's from Munira Fulan. She's got lupus, and she wonders how that it will affect her. Can we say anything about it?
Right. I'm not a medical doctor in that sense. I'm a basic scientist, as is Donald Palmer. But from my understanding, you should go and speak with your doctors, your clinicians who helps to manage your conditions, to find out the details relating to your specific conditions. Because I know that with some of the vaccines, so for example, if you have some types of allergies, they say don't take a certain type of the vaccine because they will exacerbate those allergies. So you have to have that dialogue before just saying, yes, I'm going to go and take the vaccine. You have to understand which vaccine is going to be best, most suitable for your condition. So if you know you have an underlying condition, have a good conversation with your consultant to determine what's going to be the best one for you to take. I can't tell you to take the AstraZeneca one or to take the Pfizer or one of the other ones. You have to find out what's going to be right for you.
Yeah, and to further add to that, because I'm aware, speaking to a GP friend of mine, is again, if some people are on antibiotics, it may be best to wait until that course is finished, then before you take the vaccine. So what Wayne is absolutely right. You know, it's really just to make sure that you speak to your doctor GP, and they be able to provide you know, advice and information, because again, the more people that have been vaccinated, they're well aware of, you know, either which conditions are safe or potentially to wait, because again, certain people who have got lupus is an autoimmune disease may be taking some immunosuppressive drugs, and if they are, that will clearly you know, suppress the effectiveness of the vaccine. So it's things like that where you would need to speak to you know, your GP.
Thank you very. Oh my, am I muted? Thank you very much for that, Donald. And I hope that answers your question, Manira. You have to see your GP, it seems like, and consult with them to see what's the best step to take. If we can now get the questions from Steve, the 2 hands are up. Can you put up?
Glenroy Watson and Patsy Cummings.
Okay, can we get Patsy Cummings? It sounds like you called her first, and then we get Glenroy. So Patsy, now's your chance to put your question.
Thank you very much. Actually, Glenroy was before me, but thank you for allowing me. So sorry, Glenroy. Can I just first thank CLS for putting on this amazing event? It's a very exceptionally well received. And I'd just like to thank Dr. Donald Palmer and Dr. Wayne Mitchell and Wayne. I'm a counsellor in Croydon, and we've had a lot of people that have been putting on events to try, and you're right, to demyth some of the myths that are going around, not to tell people what to do, but just to give them more information and to give them the facts. This is the clearest explanation I have been part of. I think the way in which you dealt with your presentation and the slides and your explanation were second to none. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to be very cheeky, can I ask you to come? I'll organise an event, because I would get at least 100 more people on a Zoom.
Yeah.
The more that we do to communicate to as many people as possible. And the way in which you explained everything was brilliant. And I think that will help. I've had one where I've been on with a dozen doctors, medical doctors, and they haven't explained it as plainly, as clearly to answer the concerns as you have done. So I'd be very grateful if you would consent to doing that. And obviously, religious.
We'll put our emails, and that applies to anyone. I've been doing some, and maybe Wayne can comment. Sorry to cut you, Patsy. I've been doing some for Brent. I live in Brent, so right. I've done some for Brent. In fact, just to plug Brent, we're doing one on Tuesday. Anyone can come to that, please do. But yeah, I'll send you my email.
Thank you very much. And William, the actual religious perspective, people of faith, I think that actually talks to a lot of people where they have concerns as well. So that was my plea, really, rather than the question. Thank you so much. And just to add, my mother is in the top category, and she only received a vaccine on Thursday. She's received her first vaccine. The next one's in 12 weeks. But what she burst into tears after she received it, because she now thinks she's safer than she was. And she'd been watching the television and seeing people who were decades younger than her receiving the vaccine first. So that's all I would say in terms of people who are getting it, and sometimes to encourage our community to take it, but just be a little wary that there are elders who haven't received it yet and are very frustrated, because the efficiency of getting this rolled out is not always the same in various different areas. But thank you and bless you guys, and I'll look forward to welcoming you to Croydon.
Great. Thank you for that, Patsy. Thank you very much. Now, Glenroy. Is Glenn there?
Yes, comrade. Greetings, Luke. Thanks very much. Yeah, as a diabetic, and I take several tablets recommended by the doctor. And I recall being in hospital some time ago where they wouldn't go ahead with my operation because they hadn't made sure I'd stopped certain medication. So I think if I'm ever going to be in a position to say I'm taking the vaccine, it needs to be explained whether the current medication that I'm taking and others are taking is anyway counter-effected by that, because underlying issues are obviously very much part of this conversation. But congratulations on holding this discussion, because I think it's very necessary. We need to be informed as much as possible. I was a little alarmed earlier on, though, because if people are claiming political codus about the cross-party video, would they then take away points for the fact that Kemi, who is the equality officer or equality minister, wasn't in the video, didn't play any role? I'm pretty sure she didn't even ask for it. That doesn't give reassurance, surely, of a cross-party position. So I just wonder, the comrade who raised it, whether he feels that that's take away something from that. I'm not sure about the analysis about keeping us alive because they need us for workers. You can always get other workers. So as a trade unionist, I'm not sure I'm driven by that. But, you know, yes, thank you very much. I think it's been very informative. We must have these discussion, you know, and be respectful of other people's position. I don't longer call them conspiracy theories. Some of it's crazy, obviously, but I don't want to go down that road. I want to listen, want to hear what they have to say and see whether there's any bits in there that I feel is of interest. The length of time for developing a cancer vaccine is also, I think, a very good argument, you know? So there are some things there. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always
can I respond
good to hear you.
Comment, please, Luke?
Okay, yes, yeah.
Because you made a couple of good points. Now, what I understand, and the joint is the JVCI, so that's the Joint Vaccine Council, that decided which grouping should be vaccinated first. And indeed, Glenroy, from the last information that I read, individuals with diabetes are actually the 4th or 5th criteria that will be vaccinated. And I understand that part of the clinical trial, there were people with varying ailments. And I believe that it included individuals that were had some degree of diabetes. I'm not aware of the level, so that I don't have. But in the papers that they published, these clinical trials, and I must point out, as you know, there are 3 phases of clinical trials. Phase 1, a small number, phase 2, a larger number, and then phase 3, as Wayne mentioned, involved 100,000. And I'm aware some of those had ailing, issues. One, for example, was during a clinical trial, some individuals got pregnant, and they're now being followed through, because one question of concern is, can you give this, what happens during pregnancy? So they're being followed up. So potentially you may get the call to be vaccinated. One other point, which you mentioned around conspiracy theory, which I think, given the nature of this group, I just want to highlight, and I'll try and find a link from my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Winston Morgan, who is a reader of toxicology at the University of East London. And one of the things he's written an article on, and he's been working on this, is that he said that a number of conspiracy theories are actually coming from right-wing groups. Thank you, Patricia. And are targeting the Black community. So we're rightful in having vaccine hesitancy, and I think Wayne and others have highlighted those points and are accurate. But he's pointing out that right-wing elements are actually targeting our concerns, and that's something to look out for. And if I find that article within the time frame, I'll try and email that to you. But yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Donald, for coming in with that.
Frank has hand up.
Clear, yes, okay, in a minute. Clearly, there's conspiracy theories out there, and I wouldn't be surprised if right-wing racist groups would be behind some of them. I've been on some Zoom meetings where they've actually interrupted the meeting Man managed to get into the meeting somehow and disrupted it with a lot of racism. So yes, I won't be surprised. Okay, we'll take Frank, and then after Frank's question, we will go to Paul in Jamaica. So thank you. Frank?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm one of the people who think that the conspiracy theories should not be heard. I think they should be stopped because they're doing more harm than good in a lot of cases. Let's take, as I see Glenn is a trade unionist, and so am I. And it's because of like the frontline workers, a lot of them being the BME category. We have put forward that these are the people that should be vaccinated first, right? In doing that, it comes that, oh, the Black people has to be vaccinated first. That cry was taken up. And now it looks, according to conspiracy theories, right? Look, they're vaccinating the Black people first. There's a perfectly good reason why it's happening, but it's been turned around. To think that, we've been, all kinds of things are being shoved into our bodies, it shows that they haven't understand what the vaccine is and what it does. There should be other questions coming in as to what would happen. What would happen to this thing after it goes into your body? Is it killed off or does it stay there, floating around in the body? So, there's those more questions or knowledge questions on the information rather than on what some think tank somewhere in America has put out and targeted. So I do think that the conspiracy theories should be stopped. In fact, I think it's a kind of reverse psychology will happen, in as we've been taken up by this conspiracy theories, that in the end, you will find that most of the white people will be vaccinated and all the Black people will not be vaccinated because they chose not to be vaccinated, right? So therefore, we can't get rid of COVID and we'll be more targeted by the COVID. Thank you. Unmute. Unmute. Mute.
Thank you, Frank, for keeping an eye on me there. Frank, of course, an executive member of CLS. Unless somebody wants to respond to anything you've said there, I will introduce Paul Ward from Jamaica now. One of the things the virus has done for us is that it's made it possible for us to have these live connections with our comrades in the Caribbean, and we value that, their contribution very much to the work that we do. Paul, of course, is here sometimes in London, has had physical meetings with us, our usual venue, but it's great to have you on Zoom now. Paul is an academic in Jamaica, and I think you will speak on the effects of COVID in Jamaica. Paul, you there? Can you come in?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Good morning from everybody. I know it's afternoon for you. Yeah, and first of all, thanks, Donald. Excellent presentation. As I posted my little message, I look forward to getting the link for the recording because I'm sure it'll be very, very useful for showing different people out here. We haven't actually reached the stage of sort of vaccine hesitancy here yet, because until a few days ago, it looked like it would be April until any vaccine arrived. It looks like it now might be the end of February, so perhaps the conversation might possibly start. So it'll be useful to have this ready. Our bigger concern in the last 3 days here in Jamaica with the COVID is that following the Christmas period, January went by without much of a spike, which did surprise us all. But the last 3 days, the numbers of new infections have gone up from what's been 100 or less per day, suddenly to over 200, and then yesterday over 300. Really suddenly taking off. There has been some mention that it could be the more virulent version of the virus, but not enough investigation has been done to prove that. The government suggesting that because a lot of the new cases are in the age group 20 to 39, they're suggesting that it's because people are starting to party too much. But whatever the reason, suddenly there's a massive spike, which if it carries on will be very worrying. Our hospitals are so far probably about 30% to capacity with COVID cases. So it's still a bit of space left, but it, you know, it could get out of hand if the spike continues right now. I mean, of those 300 odd cases yesterday, there was a rate of, the positivity rate was about 25%. No, sorry, 15% of the cases tested. We don't get told, of course, is where they're doing the testing, whether the testing is done in the hotspots or whether it's sort of a general testing. So it's not entirely easy to judge exactly what's going on. There are 4,000 cases in Jamaica right now, just over 130 in hospital, 21 moderately ill, and 17 critical. Altogether, we've had over 16,000 cases and just over 350 deaths so far, which have just been across a range of age groups, I think. People generally take care with wearing masks and social distance. I wouldn't say rigorously, but usually it's not too bad. More resistance to curfews, of course, from small businesses, especially bars and cook shops and so on, who really do rely on it. And not being in the formal sector, they've missed out on what government support there was earlier last year for people in jobs. If you're in the informal sector, that wouldn't come your way. So we understand their cry against the curfew, but with the latest figures, it's hard to know what alternative there really is, especially with the, well, even when the vaccine does arrive, I've heard a figure yesterday that it would be probably by the end of this year, we might get 25–30% of Jamaicans vaccinated, which of course is far short of any herd immunity figure. So up until a few days ago, it wasn't looking too bad, but the last couple of days, not so good at all. In terms of where the vaccines might come from, there finally is talk of government contact with Cuba. Our current governing party is not the most friendly party with Cuba, but at least there's been contacts recently with India and China. So perhaps more and more vaccine will arrive sooner than we think. Okay, Luke, so that's what I have to say about COVID. The rest of my rather long report, you don't really want right now, I'm sure.
Thank you very much, Paul. And you covered some really important bits of this conversation. And I know for the listeners, your network bandwidth, I've got a sign up saying it's low, but you were audible and we could hear you. So thank you for that. We get a message, about 16,000 have died so far.
No, 16,000 cases.
16,000 cases, sorry, and 350 deaths. Yeah, so we don't want to put that spike up in such a small population. But thank you for that. And also that the Cubans and the Chinese vaccines might be available in Jamaica soon. So that's very useful. I don't know if there's any question from any of the doctors that we've got on board that might want to put to Paul about Jamaica. Is there any interest there? Okay, I haven't heard a response, so we'll move on. Okay, there's
Luke, can I ask one thing that's been going around? Perhaps I can ask the medical folks amongst us. There has been talk that sunshine, which does create vitamin D, does help in a place like Jamaica. Of course, the outdoor life tends to help. They're not so congested and get inside. But the sunshine and the vitamin D, we've heard that it helps resistance to the virus. Is there a lot of truth in that?
Yeah.
Can I answer with Donald, you answering or should I?
No, you can, Wayne. I was going to ask Paul a question about Jamaica itself.
I'll answer his question, then you can ask him a question, right? Okay. So, with regards to vitamin D, right? Vitamin D is crucial. It is quite important, right? Because many people within the Black community are vitamin D deficient without even knowing it, and I can vouch for that. Last year, not 2019, I went to the doctors. I'd been coughing and whatever else. And the doctor said to me, Wayne, you're vitamin D deficient. You were off the scale with your vitamin D. You're right. It was that low. And I've been taking the vitamin D supplement since then. And I can say I've been working on the front line, as it were, with students and everything, and haven't been touched in terms of, maybe it's me anecdotally, but I do believe that the vitamin D is also quite crucial for how your immune system responds. So your immune system can respond to tackle more effectively if you have the right components there. And if any of these are out of balance, then it's less likely that your immune system can function effectively to combat it. The other thing is what you said about sunshine. The two are kind of linked, because for dark-skinned people, the vitamin D is released when we are in the sun. Okay, and so in this country, in the winter time, when we become more susceptible to viruses, it's also at the same time when we're at we've got the limits to the amount of sun which we can get. So that's also very important. And the final point is that the virus itself doesn't like UV rays from the sun as well. So the chances of the virus sitting around and being able to be passed on almost like passively is reduced, because the sun is also going to be eliminating the pathogen from the environment. So that could also be some of the reasons why countries where there is a lot of sun, where the rates are slightly lower. Donald, I'll hand it over to you.
Paul, I mean, yeah, I very much agree with Wayne. And the added point is, I know the NHS has extended its free vitamin D supplement for maybe another month. If I find a link, I'll put it on the chat, because the NHS is giving free vitamin D, I think, to certain age groups, but I'll find that out. And the other point is, Wayne's absolutely right. And also remember, the important thing though is that vitamin D is not a cure, all right, for COVID. So that's important, but it does play an important role in the immunity. Paul, could I ask you a question? Do you know if around Jamaica and its flight restrictions, if they are still, are they still cutting off flights from the UK and other parts of Europe and the US, or are they now allowing flights in?
As far as I know, flights from the UK are still not allowed in. They were for a short while, and then I think they can cut again. I think from the US, I think flights are allowed in, but a lot of people aren't coming now, because before returning to the US, they have to present a negative test before they return. So that's really suddenly put a damper on people wanting to even come here. But I think it's open to America still.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Paul, for your contribution there. Am I muted? No, I'm not. I'm not clapping to myself. Like, okay, I'm unmuted. Good. Okay, thanks, Paul, very much for that. And I think just let us know what's happening in the Caribbean. Now there's a lot of messages on the chat. I'd encourage people to check those out and look at them. And because there's so many questions, I'm thinking, Steve, we should encourage people to put up their hands. And if you can monitor that and maybe say who next to speak would help me at this end. There was some of the questions they put up about vitamin D, I think is really important, because some people felt vitamin D is crucial to defeating the virus in some ways. I personally feel a lot better when I can get my quota of vitamin D, preferably direct from the sun. now I'm being restricted because of all these travel arrangements that are happening, and also flights not going to South America, where the area that I would like to go. Okay, Steve, if you can come in and let me know, are there any hands up?
No, there are no hands up at the minute, as far as I can see.
Okay, we'll encourage people to put up their hands.
You can raise your hand by putting at the bottom of participants on the right hand side. You'll see something that says raise hand if you want to speak. But I think
hand in the air.
Tweed, do you want to say something?
Hello, thank you. I just posted quickly. Well, I just posted something about medicine prevention and also treatment, which is ivermectin, which is being. I posted something in the chats just now and a link to a medical researcher and consultant who she officially advises WHO and NHS. And she wrote to Boris Johnson and I think Matt Hancock, I think on the 5th of January. And she said she hasn't received a reply the last time I looked. Now the ivermectin is being used in other countries very effectively, and people are recovering within 24 to 48 hours. It's cheap, it's available. So that's, could either of the advisors here, or can anybody here speak on alternative, these treatments that are available rather than what's, I'm vaccine hesitant, particularly on the experimental ones. And one of the reasons is because when I hear people like Gates, who have officially said about it's the best move he ever made, 20-to-1 profit on vaccines. And I used to work for Big Pharma as well for a short time. Their profits have been bombing in the last 20 years, and this is their get out of jail card. So I do feel while they are important, and I'm not, you know, it's while it is important to get treatments and to look out for everybody, like a community thing, I'm very concerned about a business strategy that says 9 billion people on the planet has to have an injection. That to me sounds completely bizarre. Anyway, the point is, can anybody speak about the ivermectin? Because it does sound like, you know, there is, this is an official researcher and it is being used in other countries. The governments are giving their populations, you know, these medicine kits, basically. They're making them available. And it looks like we're not being offered this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Street. I'm sure one of the medical doctors might want to respond to this. Would anybody like to comment? No.
It's not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination, but I can understand if, as Tweed had said, that the ivermectin, it's about if the case is already being made, then I would, from your perspective, if you're offered the vaccine, it has to be informed consent. It can't be forced upon you. So if you feel that you have an alternative, then it's up to you to then say, well, I would like to pursue these other alternatives. There is no reason why you should have to take something if you think that you have information which could lead down another route. Okay, and if you can demonstrate as you have shown, then the clinicians should take that into consideration and make a case for you.
Yeah,
that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I had a brief look, and it seems I don't know how much it's been used in the UK. In terms of, you know, the vitamins, vitamin D, C. I know zinc is also appears to be an important element for immune fitness. This is more from a preventative perspective, whereas where people have been looking at this, particularly if you've got severe COVID, it's unclear whether these measures is going to be sufficient. So I agree with Wayne, is to make an informed decision. I think you made reference to the current vaccines, the one that's been approved as experimental. And I think I've actually sat on one of these boards. I actually previously sat on the MHRA board, that's a regulatory board. You know, if a drug is not really meets the safety requirements, it just won't get through. So whereas I grant you, there's still things that we don't know. I'm aware, I've been sat on a board, anything that's experimental just won't get passed. And the other point, and one of the questions that's raised was around, you know, business immunity. What I should point out from what I've read, and maybe there's others who can comment further, but from what I've read, and I've spoken to a couple of GPs about it, is that it's the government will take the responsibility if something goes wrong. And I'm aware this has happened with previous drugs and previous pandemics. So this idea is nothing new. So that's something that governments do around the country. I don't know much about Bill Gates, so I can't comment. One other point, because I know of interest of time, someone talking about DNA and messenger RNA. So don't forget, these vaccines, as Wayne pointed out, are short-lived. So from messenger RNA, that's basically a molecule that makes protein. Okay, so once you've made that protein, that's it. You'll make an immune response to that. That messenger RNA is degraded. The messenger RNA can't make DNA. So, you know, concern people had, can it alter my DNA? The answer to that is no. As well as, I think, Hector, which Wayne and I commented around, you know, animal products, no. And I should point out, we've produced a fact sheet. And in fact, the British Scholars of Imam have also produced a fact sheet which contain the same information that Wayne and I have spoken about. And I know similar fact sheets have been produced by other religious organizations that I know at similar points that William has raised. So a number of groups now have been looking at a lot of the evidence and have been able to identify key concerns and put that as answers down as frequently asked questions.
Could I just come back in?
Yeah.
Just with regards to, I just had another look at the ivermectin to determine what might be the issue. What I found out is that, yes, it does appear to have been in cell lines where they've looked at COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2 infection. It does appear that the ivermectin is able to inhibit the replication. But the dosage which is required for that to occur, if you was to translate that from the Petri dish which they're using to the amounts that you would need in the human body, it would then become toxic within the human body. So from that point of view, it hasn't been approved in the dosage which would be required to replicate what they see in on the tissue culture in the lab. So that might be one of the reasons why at the moment the ivermectin has not gone through the approval process for use on humans in this particular scenario. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Great. Thanks for clearing that up, Wayne. What I want to propose to do now is to give the speakers an opportunity to wrap up in 2 minutes, anything that they might want to say in closing, some closing remarks. But before I do, usually we give people an opportunity to advertise any meeting or make an announcement before we close the meeting. I would just like at this stage to remind people that our next Sunday meeting will be on Windrush, and we've got Jackie McKenzie as our main speaker. So people will get an opportunity to have another discussion on the effects of Windrush on the Caribbean peoples and for other populations as well. So thank you. If I can now, you guys will come in order as you like when you're ready to speak, to just give some closing remarks for maybe a minute or so on the meeting. And before you do, thank you so much, Dave. There's just been wonderful response in the chat. There's been so many, and people are very congratulatory.
Should I go first? I'll go first. Okay, then.
Closing remarks.
First of all, I'd just like to again thank the organisers for inviting us here. Myself, Donald and William. It's been a very, very pleasant experience coming and discussing these issues with you. At the end of the day, my stance is that you have to make your own informed decision. You know your circumstances better than anybody else, and so you have to make a decision which is right for you, but make sure you're making that decision based on the information that you've scrutinized. Do you trust the source of the information which you're being given before you make any decision? That's the standpoint which I would take, because there's a lot of information on both sides of the argument which you do need to check your sources, and you have to check it out and see how that works for you. Because if it doesn't work for you, then ask some more questions, and don't feel that you're being browbeaten or badgered into doing something which you don't necessarily want. At the end of the day, it has to be informed consent.
Great, wise words indeed. Thank you, Wayne.
Wayne's put it something. I just again would like to thank CLS. I'd also like to thank everyone that's listening and everyone that puts questions. And I agree with Wayne. If there are points of view you need to be addressed, please put those questions forward. And I commend again, CLS for putting this on. There's a clear need for our community to be asking questions, and I've got legitimate concerns, and I'm glad CLS are putting on this event. And really, I just want to end with what Wayne said, in the sense that knowledge is power, and it's really about having the knowledge and the information. And I think Mr. Frank Murray highlighted the point that there's a lot of misinformation that appears to be coming through. So we need to make sure that we can be discerning, so we can get the right information, so we can then make, you can make an informed choice. So thank you.
Thank you, Donald. That's fine.
Yeah. Just add my thanks. Yeah, very valuable, informative event. So as I would just say that in thinking about the specifics of the pandemic COVID-19, it's set against the broader pandemic of racism and living in a white supremacist society. So we have to inoculate ourselves against the specific pandemic, but we also have to tackle the broader pandemic, because those vulnerabilities will still coming at us if we don't tackle the broader pandemic as well. So the two things I think are linked.
Great, thank you, William. That's fantastic. Hector, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Yes, please, Hector.
Okay. Yeah, just a few words for me. Just again, thanks for the invitation to join this meeting today. It was much appreciated, and it was very, very helpful in formative discussion. I think just the thing I was just wanting to say really is, following on what William just said, I think what COVID has done is actually intensified existing inequalities, and I think that raised a key challenge for us. I mean, certainly as a trade unionist myself, I mean, I know in a lot of ways I'm quite lucky. I'm able to work from home, and I have done for months. But I know a lot of my fellow workers, often Black workers, have had to travel into the office or into the factory every day on public transport, taking a lot of risk. So my main plug is basically, if you're not in a trade union, do consider joining a trade union. And if you are in a trade union, please raise any concerns that you have with your trade union reps, because no matter what sector you're in, if you're in a trade union, the trade unions have really come to the fore in the last few months in protecting members' interests during this pandemic. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Hector. It's very good for you to remind us of the importance of trade unions. We are, of course, affiliated to many trade unions, and we, from their support, we're able to at times put on huge meetings in big halls at very little cost and with a lot of support. So we appreciate the input of trade unions in our work. So thank you, Dave. Now, Paul, maybe we can get Paul from Jamaica. Are you there, Paul? Still connected? You did warn me earlier that it's come and go. Paul?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Luke.
You want to do closing remarks? Yeah, please, some closing remarks.
Well,
or notice of any meeting.
I look forward to the video of today's meeting, because I will post it around the place. It will be a YouTube link, right? It will be a YouTube link, the recording.
Yeah, I'm sure you put in that question to Steve.
Okay.
I'm not technology up.
Right. What I shall do is once I get my hands on the video, which it takes about an hour or so for Zoom to sort that out, I'll then post it on YouTube. I'll put the link into the website. I will circulate everyone who has been at this meeting with the link, so in case they want to pass it on. And given that there were many questions and answers in the chat, I'll make sure that the chat is also available on that link on the website, so that people can reread things and so on. And I'll take out some of the links that the doctors have given us and make a special little kind of link section. So probably by tomorrow tea time, you should have something usable.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Good.
Thank you, Luke, as well. Luke, as regards the Jamaican situation. Luke?
Yes, cheers. Yeah, yes, Jamaica.
Yeah, I was going to say, if there's any special news regarding this sudden spike in Jamaica, I'll let you know. You can pass it on.
Oh, great. Thanks, Paul. Okay, all remains for me to do is to really thank everyone, thank the medical doctors who've come on board to share so much information and really raise the awareness and the level of understanding about this virus and the vaccine. And that's been invaluable for me, and I'm sure for many of the people listening here. As you know, we don't pay our speakers, and so we're very grateful that people give up the time to come on to our meetings and speak when they do. Earlier on, I mentioned we weren't a funded organization. And so I want to appeal again to people. For all members haven't renewed the membership this year, to do that now. This is the time of the year. And for new people, please visit our website. There's opportunity to also join CLS.
Are you allowing announcement?
I also want to thank
Dennis wants to.
hold on. Okay, in a minute. Okay, go on, Dennis.
Just two announcements. One is, as you know, Bernard Cord was doing a revamp of How the West Indian Child was made educationally subnormal in the British school system. That book has now been published, and I had earlier posted on the chat by mistake links to the book. I'm going to publish it on the chat now. so that people can copy it. In addition, we hope to have an internet launch of the book on the 31st of March at about 7:30 UK time. And we hope to have Jeremy Corbyn, who wrote a foreword to the 50th edition, which has just been published, Bernard Cord himself, yourself, Luke, Chris Searle, and Paul McNee, and others, including Jackie McKenzie, and a plethora of others. So please bear that in mind. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Dennis, for that announcement. I'd almost forgotten about that, so it's great that you were there listening in. I'll continue with my thank yous to Steve for holding the fort and for conducting this meeting so well. For all EC members actually who attend our regular meetings, and you know, we won't be able to function without those members. For Omar for making these connections with the medical, was really made this meeting a success. And I want to thank the people who attended, because without you, you know, we won't be able to continue having an effect really in the Caribbean or wherever we decide to put our attention. And I should have said in the opening remarks that a couple of issues that are always up there for us that we're looking at. And one is reparations for slavery. And we think there's some action will be coming up soon, because I've got word that one of our best activists and stalwarts in raising this issue is Sir Hilary Beckles, and we understand there might be some threats to his job. Won't surprise me, because we know in the past the powers that be do not want the issue on the table, have actually managed one way or the other to change governments. We know in Nigeria, Abiola was removed from office, and because he had become very loud about raising issues about reparations for slavery. We've had Aristide in Haiti removed from office because he too was beginning to challenge France about reparations. And so it wouldn't surprise me that anybody who dares to challenge the people who do not want to pay reparations will try to stifle this movement. At the conference also in Durban at the turn of the century, discussions were also undermined by the Americans and by the British government to try and keep the issue of reparations off the table. We will have to be vigilant, and we will have to continue agitating in that area. That's a crucial. Windrush, as I said early on, is important for us and will always be there. So I know we're at the dot of 4 o'clock at the moment, so I thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you join us at the next meeting. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Doc. Okay, thank you, Steve. I don't think